Yeah, as you can see today, we're going to discuss, talk with some founders about how they went from their initial idea through the MVP stage. With us, we've got Adesanya, co-founder and president of Moving Analytics, Jayce Hafner, co-founder and CEO of FarmRaise, Antti Karjalainen, founder and CEO of Robocorp, and Sophia, MD, MPH, CEO and co-founder of PandiaHealth. So thanks everyone for joining. I want to start with, going to go around to the panelists and ask that you give a brief introduction of yourself and what your business does. And then we'll go right into the first question, which is if you could go ahead then and describe your progression from your initial idea through the MVP. So if we could go ahead and start with Ade, you're first up.
Cool, thank you. So thank you everybody for having me. It's a pleasure to speak to you. So I am Adesanya. I am the co-founder and president of Moving Analytics. Moving Analytics is a virtual cardiac rehab provider. So essentially, we help people after a heart attack or any kind of heart surgery to do their rehab at home through a virtual program. So essentially, patients have an app on their phone, we connect them to a telehealth nurse, and then patients get a remote monitoring kit that they use to manage their health. And the problem we're solving in cardiology is that today, less than 20% of patients do cardiac rehab because there are not enough cardiac rehab centers in the country. And so we've designed a way to make that program virtual. And from a Stanford perspective, all the clinical research and protocols behind that program were actually developed at Stanford. So we ended up licensing some research from Stanford to build out that technology. But happy to be on the panel and to tell you more about my company and our experience going from the original idea to where we are today.
Okay, thanks, Ade. And yeah, that's one thing I didn't mention is, our panelists today, their niches and their target audience are just so unique. So we've got a really good mix. So, Jayce, if you could go ahead and give us a brief introduction and talk for a few minutes about FarmRaise.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I am actually calling in from our farm in the Shenandoah Valley. FarmRaise is a fintech platform that makes it really easy for farmers to match with and access grants and loans. I'm the CEO and co-founder, and this company first was born through actually a research project when I was working on my master's thesis at Stanford and speaking with producers all throughout California's Central Valley. These were mostly ranchers, and asking them about what are the biggest challenges you face as an agriculture producer. And these ranchers kept saying again and again, access to finance. This is one of the most frustrating, time-consuming parts of my work. I hate dealing with this administrative burden. I have no bandwidth at the end of the day to deal with this. And as a farmer's daughter, this challenge deeply resonated with me because I remember watching my dad, the way he would start his day and end his day in the darkness, getting up at 4:30 in the morning to check the cows and then finishing up farm chores after he worked his second job doing construction, being absolutely exhausted at the end of the day. There's just no bandwidth to deal with farm finance. And so this challenge is one that hit really close to home for me personally. And I actually teamed up with a classmate at the GSB who was also in the joint MBA MS program that I was a part of. And we spent our time in grad school, a bit unconventionally, just talking with a bunch of farmers in the Midwest and the East Coast, and also more ranchers in California, and validated this need. Everything that we've done to this date has been really farmer centric. Our company's core value is farmer obsession. And so as we talk about bringing the notion from it being, and ideas are a dime a dozen, they're great, but really at the end of the day, it's all about execution, and building that path toward MVP for us has been completely contingent on farmers, making sure there's a really short feedback loop between what we're building and what farmers are telling us they need. And so those interviews were core to helping us develop our MVP platform that served as kind of the first product, low-code product that we pushed out to producers early in 2020.
So Jayce, one quick question for you while you just mentioned that. From talking to the Lisa cohort, one of the questions that came up is, what's the right number of interviews? And I think the right answer, it all depends, right? But in your case, that was a theme that you mentioned a few times. How many actual interviews did you conduct? Do you know?
At this point, we've done hundreds. I think when we did our first MVP, it was dozens. Our head of product is, his rule of thumb is we need at least 5 as a minimum to validate, a consideration for a shift and how we're thinking about solving the problem. So 5 POVs that kind of stack up. But I think the more interviews, the better. And they don't have to be, super in depth. I think just like hopping on the phone with a customer and showing them something visual quickly and getting a gut check on that can be really useful.
Okay, thank you very much. Antti?
Hey, everyone. Yes, so I'm Antti, CEO and founder of Robocorp. And so Robocorp is a company focused on building an open source ecosystem for something called RPA. RPA stands for robotic process automation. It's not actual robots, it's software robots. I want to make it always clear to people when I start talking about robots that it's not like physical moving robots, but it's the robots that we build are a soft piece of software that automate basically routine work for humans. So anything that you can document and describe with clear rules related to IT systems. So think about your month ends, closing of books at an accounting shop, for instance. You can automate that. So the industry of RPA has been the fastest growing segment in enterprise software for, I'd say, 4 years consecutively right now. And so it's really controlled by proprietary closed tech ecosystems. So we want to build an open source community for that space, and we've been building the company since 2019, got funded properly end of that year, and right now scaling up the company, going to our first enterprise customers all over the world essentially. We are a fully distributed team across 8 different countries, 40 plus people right now. I don't know the exact count. Been partnering up with some great venture capitalists like Benchmark, for instance, is our lead investor through the seed round. So happy to tell about that path. But I have a good story that relates to this group of people. So I had when I started the company, I was in Finland without any network to any investors whatsoever. I flew to San Francisco for a few months during the summer of 2019 to just knock on doors and start meeting on investors. I thought that would be a good idea, but it turned out that it was pretty hard to actually get a meeting with anyone, really serious. So Hira's friend was actually hosting with Hira this event at Embarcadero Center, where there was this one famous VC partner talking, and I thought it would be a good idea to join there. And it ended up so that I actually got a meeting with the VC firm after the event, and I was able to build a network out of that one connection that ended up resulting in this 5.6 million seed round with Benchmark as the lead investor. So that's kind of a funny story to tell always, but yeah. So here we are. Happy to tell more during the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Antti. That's a pretty impressive elevator speech you must have had ready there. So we'll go last, certainly not least, Sophia.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sophia Yen. My mom and Dr. Jill Biden are all into claiming your titles. So always claim your titles and get credit for what you've worked hard to do. I'm a physician, and about 7 years ago, I'm a clinical associate professor at Stanford. I was giving a talk to a bunch of physicians. Why don't those pesky women take their birth control? And one of the top reasons was they didn't have it in their hand. They didn't have time to go to the pharmacy every single month for 20, 40 years of their lives in the proscribed 7 days ahead of time. And most of us run out of our birth control on Sunday. And if you go the Sunday before, no, that's 8 days ahead of time, and the insurance company will not pay for it. You have to come back the next day. And we're like, I'm at the pharmacy. I have time now, and I have meetings, and I have children, and I have things to do Monday through Friday. Can I get it now? No, you cannot. And so that was the original purpose of this company, is set it and forget it. Let Pandia worry so you don't have to. Hashtag Pandia peace of mind. And then when we ran ads for free birth control delivery, 60% of the women that responded didn't have a prescription. And it's like, do you not know that in the United States, if you want prescription birth control, you need a prescription. You need to see a doctor needs to write the prescription. And I'm a doctor. And as an entrepreneur, I didn't want to miss out on 60% of the customers every time I ran an ad. So PandiaHealth was born, the end-to-end solution for birth control, from an online doctor's visit, if you need it, to delivery to your door. And with every package, we include 1, 2, or 3 months of birth control, whatever your insurance will allow or whatever you'll pay. We put in something delightful. So candy, high chew, chocolate, a discount off of a vibrator, a lube, a lot of female-founded, female-led companies. So any consumer products, goods company would be smart to partner with us, because instead of fighting for people's eyes on Facebook, Instagram, Google, where they can't touch and feel your product, we can throw it in there and the women are like, oh, thank goodness, my birth control is here. And oh, here's a new cookie, here's a new toothpaste, here's a new eyeliner, so transfer that happiness possibly to your product. We're starting with birth control, which, as I mentioned, women are on for 20 to 40 years of their lives, and we're growing with them as they grow. So we can do prenatal, postnatal, fertility. My friends are all pushing for menopause, and menopause is a new hot field. So we are definitely going there sooner rather than later, because it is an untouched field and could really benefit from the only women-founded, women-led, the only doctor-led company in the birth control delivery space. And that's how it all began.
Thank you, Dr. Sophia. That was brilliant. Thank you. And we'll stick with you. You can be first up with the next question. So a lot of would-be founders, they never get out of the gate, because they sort of have it in their mind that I've got to have a complete idea, a full business plan ready to go. And of course, that's certainly not the case. So next up, we want to discuss maybe a particular challenge or any sort of massive pivot that you had to do along the way, and maybe your mindset behind it, what factors induced the change, and what you actually, how you proceeded, if you could, please.
I would say that, a lot of people think it's fast, quick, and hard. And it is for some people, but for us, it's been a long slog, and it takes much longer than you think to raise the funds. It just depends, who your connections are and who you can get in front of, and whether or not your idea clicks with the people that you are speaking to. I would say when I first started pitching, I was pitching the traditional VCs, and it was like a 70-year-old, no offense, Caucasian male. And they were like, how hard is it to get to the pharmacy every month? My wife clearly enjoys going to the pharmacy all the time. And I could always sell the executive assistant who booked the appointment. She's like, oh my God, this is amazing. I totally want this. I love this. We surveyed women. 80% of women want this service. And it's free to the end user. Who wouldn't want it? But when you pitched it, they're like, nah, I like golf. I like coffee. I like my fancy car. They didn't understand that 50% of the population is chained to the pharmacy every single month. And the opportunity to build the brand that women trust is huge. And no one else has done it yet. And no one else has done it well. And if they had done it well, I wouldn't have done it. So I think, my story is ask me how many accelerators I've been through. I've been through Women's Startup Lab, Stanford StartX, Springboard Enterprise, just did all raise. But to me, it's about building the community of support. And that's why I'm so focused on women helping women, but also people of color and just startups helping each other rather than reinventing the wheel. Let's get on these groups and share with each other. Who is the best SEO? Who is the best Facebook? Who is the best PR? What experience have you had? And let's learn and share from each other. So I think for me, it's been random networking that has gotten me my funding. I did as many possible pitch competitions as possible. And then a judge from the pitch competition became an advisor, introduced me to my lead investor. I went to a conference and the woman next to me says, I love what you do. I'm going to get you funded. And in my mind, many have said that, all have failed, but I took the meeting and that finished off my round. So make sure you are kind to everyone. Don't assume that anyone is useless to you, because the biggest funder may come from somewhere you never thought of.
Wow, thank you. Jayce, can you go next? Same question. Pivots and challenges?
Absolutely. And I think, as an early stage founder, it's so challenging to balance the desire to really lean into fundraising while also really leaning into your customers at the same time. It's hard. You feel like, your startup's like a really hungry, baby that needs to be fed all the time. And on top of that, you feed it through feeding your customers, but you also feed it through getting financial resources in the door. And so how do you make sure that you stay true to both parties and really create a financial backing structure that is right for the spirit of your company and for your customers? What we found at FarmRaise is that your investors out of the gate, the right ones will get your vision. You will feel that synergy probably even in your first meeting when you sit down with them and share what you're thinking. We came out of the gate at FarmRaise fundraising out of an accelerator. And that was really helpful because the accelerator provided a lot of intros to, sort of the usual suspects of venture financing, and a lot of folks who weren't usual suspects as well. And we went into those meetings just, getting a lot of different feedback from these investors. Sometimes folks loved it immediately, and sometimes they had very nuanced, opinions for us about how we should change our pitch or how our business model wasn't going to work. And it was, it can be emotionally exhausting because this is your baby, and like it's very personal. And you think coming out of these, you're like, oh, should I really take this feedback into account? I've known this person for 30 minutes and they're telling me it's not going to work. Like, how personally should I take this? And sifting through that feedback, I think was one of the biggest challenges. But like I said, our investors who we ended up going with, like from the first meeting, they got our vision. And it wasn't just like they were like, picking up what we're putting down. They were getting it and then they were adding to it. We were brainstorming in our first meeting. And so I think finding that synergy out of the gate is really important, because as you're fundraising, you're going to feel torn between spending time catering to venture capitalists and their desires and feedback, and also staying true to your customer base and the thesis you're building based on talking to your customer base. So you have to stay really grounded in your customers moving forward, and finding a backer who gets your customers and is just, excited about your vision out of the gate and wants to help you meld that, but not change it in a big, fairly significant way. I think that that's really when you found the dream team. And we found from early on, like, you get a sense of who those people are even from the first meeting, because they're just going to start riffing with you. They're not going to try to change you. They're just going to try and build on the idea you're putting forward.
Okay, thank you, Jayce. Antti?
Yeah, I was trying to think through pivots and challenges. There's been so many. What could I highlight here? If
you don't mind, if you've got a really good pivot, because so far, with Dr. Sophia and Jayce, they were sort of straight ahead, and it sounds to me anyway, forgive me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for you guys, but you had your idea and that sort of wound up being your endpoint. Did you have any, detours or have to change your route along the way?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wanted to create the product that we now have for a long time. So I had that in mind, and before actually figuring out what the right product is going to ultimately look like, I actually had to do a lot of exploration even before we started the company. So I actually spent a year getting to know the industry, was really in and out before I could craft the vision that we started aiming at with the company. When we started executing that, we set out with this path that we're gonna create a bottom-up go-to-market motion through software developers to build an ecosystem in RPA and so forth with this kind of cloud-led model. Going into customer conversations, talking, a lot of people just get what we're building in the software space. If you're not in the software space, you might totally have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you're there, if you have that need and understand, you love the vision. But then we had this segment of the market, who we were really not a match just because of our cloud focus. So actually we had to, or we didn't have to, but we decided to basically pedal back on some of the core principles that we had set out to ourselves early on. So just this last December, we decided that, okay, we're gonna go straight to enterprises instead of building it all bottom up. We're gonna start creating a sales force instead of doing basically self-service SaaS. We're gonna create a self-hostable version instead of going all in on cloud. But these are maybe some things that we just learn by being open-minded and pragmatic about the market. The market might be the way that we want it to be in 5 years or 4 years or 10 years, who knows. In the meantime, you just need to keep that vision, because there's a good vision in place, but be pragmatic in the meantime and really be open to even shifting some of the core foundations that we thought have to be this way in the beginning. So that's, we made a fairly large pivot in the past 2 months, and now we're executing on that path, and it seems to be working. I'm super excited about that.
Okay, as far as the pivots, trying as best you can to be objective with your own program, have they been as timely as you've liked? Have you hesitated? Have you maybe waited too long or moved too quickly, in your own opinion?
Yeah. I hope that I haven't moved too quickly, because oftentimes you get some feedback and you over index on it, and just you can't jump from every feedback that you get. You just can't shift all the time. But as you start getting some signals that point the same way, you might want to do some tests. So I started, for instance, with our product strategy, I started testing it out, and went into customer and investor meetings with saying that sure, we can serve that need that you have, like would you engage right now, what would be the price point, and so forth. We had some false signals that we had. So we had this, I think it was 3 months back, I was certain that one path would lead to a lot of success. But when actually testing it out with customers before even building it out, noticed that they were really not that interested, even though they were saying that they would. So we have been trying to test everything out before actually building anything. So I hope we are pretty rapid in our kind of iteration cycle. So I hope that I've been timely. I don't have that kind of doubts myself.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask a question right there?
Sure.
If we want to say questions at the end, but
okay.
Just how do you screen feedback? That's kind of, I think, a good question.
Screening feedback is really like a process of taking in what people say, and I think as the CEO, you just need to be on top of things, talking to customers, investors, employees, developers, every stakeholder all the time, and trying to just filter it out and make a sense of the world, have a sort of picture of the world, be ready to shift it. Nothing special, I think.
Okay, I thought maybe that you had a methodology of some sort, because I can imagine people go, okay, thank you.
No methodology whatsoever.
Thank you, Antti. Okay, Ade, your turn.
Yeah, so I guess I'll share I've definitely had lots of pivots in my company, but I think also how we settled on the idea to go after is kind of an interesting journey. So in our own case, we had some patents. So I went to USC for grad school, and my co-founder had gotten some patents in how you help older adults exercise and motivate them to exercise. And I was working in the technology transfer office then, helping researchers to figure out how to commercialize their technologies or their research. And so he came to me and he said, sitting or being sedentary is the new smoking, and he wanted to solve that problem. And I'm like, great, but we all know we should be exercising, and we all don't exercise, as often as we should. And so I said, if we're going to build a business, around getting people to exercise, we kind of need to figure out in healthcare, why is exercise so critical to the recovery process that people are very motivated, right? Because one of the things that when you think about building a business, is this a vitamin or is this a painkiller, right? You want to find those painkiller problems to solve. So we both agreed that we didn't know what the answer was, but fortunately for us, USC had a great medical school. So we went to medical school and we tried to interview as many clinicians as possible. And we're like, hey, we're good at motivating people to exercise. We have a good technology to track exercise. Can you, where in healthcare exercise is so important to that recovery process? And so we started getting lots of ideas around, diabetes and heart disease and like just chronic disease management in general. But on this journey of customer discovery, I was at an event at Google one day, and the moderator was like, make sure you talk to 10 people before you leave here. And I was like on number 6, and there was the 7th person that I kind of just grudgingly said, hey, how are you? And I introduced myself, and he told me he worked for the American Heart Association. And so I told him, hey, I have this technology for exercise I'm trying to figure out. And, I know the American Heart Association does a lot of programming around, heart disease and exercise. And so he said, why don't you recommend to me or send me a proposal on what you want to do with the American Heart? So we sent him some ideas of like how we could, especially for the American Heart Association does a lot of marathons and walkathons. And so we wanted to, kind of build an app to help them gamify that experience. And so that was the original proposal we sent to them. But they came back to us and said, hey, there's this problem we've been trying to solve in cardiac rehab. It's a really important service for people who had a heart condition. Exercise is a big part of it. And we're trying to figure out a way to do it virtually. And we think your skill set is better suited in kind of like building out that program. And so they were applying for a research grant to do a study in telecardiac rehabilitation. And so they offered they asked us if we could build out the platform for them. So we agreed to do it. We didn't know what cardiac rehab was. Interestingly, they didn't end up getting that grant. And we were like, what's this cardiac rehab thing anyways? Let's go do our research and understand like what is cardiac rehab. So we called up like about 50 cardiac rehab centers in California and said, hey, we're grad students at USC. We're trying to build an app for cardiac rehab, but we have zero idea what you guys do. So we're like, can you tell us what you do? What's the biggest problem in cardiac rehab today? And what do you think is the future of cardiac rehab? And consistently, everybody told us the same thing. Cardiac rehab is great. When people do it, they live longer. The problem is that they can't get to the rehab center. So if there's a way for them to do cardiac rehab at home, that'd be awesome. And so consistently, we kind of heard the same feedback. And that's kind of how we ended up choosing cardiac rehab as an issue focus on. I think to kind of dovetail into like the fundraising experience as part of this, when we started the company, this was almost 8 years ago, my co-founder and I were 23 and 27 years old, and we're trying to build this company, Cardiac Rehab. And lots of the investors we talked to, even though they thought it may be a good idea, they didn't think we could build a healthcare company just because of like we're in grad school and we have an experience. And they thought that, it took a kind of very specialized skill set. And so we did a bunch of accelerators, like some of the other people on the call. But it took us pretty close to 150 investor meetings to get our first investor that cared about what we're doing. And once we found that investor, then he was able to help us kind of close out that round. And so it was hard initially, but I think for us, what kept us going through those hundreds of meetings where people were telling us no was we had talked to, at that point, over 100 customers. We knew for sure that cardiac rehab was a service that was so important. We knew that, a virtual option was kind of like a no-brainer and the market needed it. And we had talked to hundreds of customers that if we could build a solution, they were going to buy it, the next day. And so that kind of gave us conviction, even though, the investors were telling us no, and no, we had a hard time fundraising initially. Just knowing that customers needed it, it was more like, this investor doesn't get it, he doesn't get it. And, we kept us persevering until we find the right investor. So I think that that's one of the things that's very important when you start in building your startup, is really kind of index on the customer and like solving their problem, and really kind of getting to the heart of like what it's going to take for them to like buy your solution. Because once you have that conviction, then it's much easier to kind of weather the storm of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is going to be very hard and it's going to be different roller coasters. But if you're pretty certain that you're building, a valuable product that people are going to buy, then it's much easier psychologically to just kind of persevere. And so that's kind of my experience and my perspective.
Okay, thanks, Ade. So we'll stay with you because the next question actually is on, how did you get your first customer? So all of those facilities that said, if you build it, we will buy it.
Yeah.
How many actually delivered?
So that's interesting. Great question. So our first customer story is interesting. So we did an accelerator in New York called Blueprint Health. I don't think they run anymore, but they had a very interesting model where they believed in getting a customer first and then building a product after. And they didn't want you to kind of like, overbuild your product. And so the goal for the program was for us to call up 600 customers in 3 months and try and sell the product. And so it was kind of like a New York style, like, trading desk where like, essentially you're supposed to just walk the phone every day. And so they helped us create a call script, and we will walk that call script on the call. And then when we get off the call, we'll go back to the, the leaders of the program and tell them like, hey, this is why the person hung up the phone on us. And so we'll kind of try to optimize the script, to figure it out. I think what was interesting from that experience was we didn't close any deals off the phone, but we learned about all the objections, like all the reasons why people like would say no, what people were looking for. And it really helped us to kind of build out our collateral. And what really helped us to get our first customer was the accelerator also had this incredible mentor network. So every day, 3 to 5 mentors who were either healthcare executives, health plan executives, VCs, who come in and they'll choose companies from the cohort that they felt they could help. And they'll have a 30-minute, meeting with you. And so from those meetings, people started introducing us to, people would be like, hey, I play golf for the chief of cardiology at this hospital. And so we started getting those introductions. And the good thing was, because we had on the phone learned about like all the things we shouldn't do, when we started to get those warm introductions, we were just much more efficient, and we really kind of knew how to sell them. And so, we got our first customer. We got 4 customers out of that accelerator, just from those warm introductions. So I think, especially on the enterprise side, one of the things that, to think about is enterprise deals, it's much easier when you kind of come in through a warm introduction, so trying to find someone who has a lot of credibility that can introduce you to our customer, it helps a lot. And I found from my own personal experience that, a lot of cold selling, doesn't, at least in healthcare, I don't know about other industries, it's kind of, the conversion is very low, but you should always kind of optimize for, getting an introduction to the decision maker. So that's my own experience with, we get my first customer.
Thank you. That was great. So, Dr. Sophia, going straight to direct to consumer, right? That's vastly different. So tell us about getting your first customers, please.
Yes. So getting the first customers for me was working my networks, right? So Facebook group, MIT sorority, email list, my reproductive rights nonprofit friends that I've been with. So I've been in the reproductive rights movement for 20 plus years. And I know the heads of almost any women's organization in the United States. So getting them to tell their friends, getting them to tweet about it, getting them to put it on their Facebook, getting them to consider putting it on their email list. We've always had friendships with the nonprofits. You know, I'd much rather write them a check than Facebook, Google AdWords, or Instagram. And so you send me customers, they get wonderful birth control delivered, you know, hashtag Pandia peace of mind. And in return, I write you a check. So it's a win-win for both sides. But I would say the very first customers were, you know, friends, and it's kind of like your fundraising. You start with your friends and then you expand that circle and you go farther. And then where we are today is Facebook, Google, Insta, AdWords, very, very expensive, all sorts of glitches in their algorithm as they try to shut things down because of politics or whatever. And we get stuck back into learning phase. And there's been crazy stuff with Google Ads where the person on the other end, we were having difficulties running our ads because their health, and there's restrictions on that. And so they said, well, why don't you apply under abortion? And we're like, we have nothing to do with abortion. We're about preventing unplanned pregnancy. And if we were to do abortion, we would get stuck even in a worse situation. And so the customer service person just didn't get it. And it's crazy, the regulations around birth control, where there are countries you can't advertise birth control. And it makes sense, but we're only in the United States, but they were applying other countries' standards to us. And we're like, we only are in the United States. And we recently got our Facebook Messenger ads shut down because they changed something in Europe. And again, we are only in the United States. Why did you shut down our ads? And so we are also working on 70% of our website traffic is organic. And as I like to say, I live, breathe, eat, and prescribe birth control. So I am not just the CEO, but I'm a member of the club, and I can generate content like nobody else. So if you go on YouTube, we do a Facebook Live, you go to our blog, you go to our frequently asked questions, we're working the SEO optimization. So social media is where we're getting it now. And how we originally got it was, you know, Facebook groups, email groups, hitting up all my friends. Hey, I'm launching this. Let's do this.
Oh, great. Thank you. Where did Antti, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Oh, there you are. I was looking for your video. Same question to you. It sounds like you're really just ramping up to face these issues now, but as far as your initial customers, how did you proceed?
Yeah, so being a software product for developers, it's a bit different. We don't use Facebook Messenger ads or anything like that. So basically, when we got our first product in a stage where it was usable, we just gave it away. So you know, just give it away for a bunch of people. Then when we were in a stage where we had our platform that you actually could pay for, we started charging people for it, and some of them will convert to paying and some of them don't, keep using the free tier. That's fine. And so it's really kind of that kind of motion in software developer space is a lot different than anything else that you would encounter elsewhere. But then going into enterprises like larger companies, they're like Ade says, these warm intros do really mean the world. So just working your network to get through the first warm intros, and you know, some people come through and start asking for it, and you follow up. I've never done cold calling in this company. I've done it before, and I know what it's like. I actually sold consulting services, and just calling people up, and you know, you can have this picture of an introverted software engineer trying to call up clients. And it was like that in the beginning, but it's really you learn a lot by doing that, but it really doesn't apply into enterprise software. So So through warm intros, giving out some pieces of the software, and playing by the rules of the software developer ecosystems. I think that's the short answer.
That's great, thank you. Jayce, same question. And in your industry, so you're dealing with farmers and financial institutions, right? So who exactly, like maybe so blunt, how do you make money? Are you taking some basis points on transactions, or
who's our customer? So yeah, great question. It's wild with FarmRaise because our main customer is the farmer. They pay a monthly subscription fee, and they also pay a fee for success on capital that we unlock for them. So we get paid when they get paid. On charging banks, lending institutions, we're still figuring that out. At this point, we have seen willingness to pay, but we really want to focus on the farmers. Actually, we think building a product around their needs is going to be key to capturing that market. And it's crazy with farmers because they are small and medium-sized businesses, but they're also consumers. And so when you're selling to them, it's more like trying to sell a consumer app to an individual than selling to a small mid-sized business. But there are also lessons from the enterprise sales world too. And so with farmers, and Karen, I know you're working with farmers, so you're probably going to run into this too. You almost always have to have a phone call with them before they'll buy. And we learned this in kind of a roundabout way. So a little bit of background on me. Before FarmRaise, my long-term job had been in public policy and working for nonprofits, and focusing on farmers as our core population that we're serving. Half of farmers in the US aren't profitable. It's a really tight margin business. I felt really bad trying to get farmers to pay. I just felt icky about it. And so the way I first started testing this out with farmers is my co-founder and I, we offered free consultations to farmers to understand their grant and loan options. And that's how we got our first customers, because they then learned more about us, what we would do. And a lot of times they'd be like, hey, I will totally pay you to help me navigate this space. And that's when it clicked for me. I was like, look, first of all, if I'm going to build a really big defensible business, I need to get over this discomfort I'm having with asking farmers to pay. We need to find a pricing strategy that works for them, that's not predatory, but we need to ask them to start paying for this. But to get in the door, we actually started scaling up this, OG talk to farmers for a consultation to get them in the door. So today, every farmer who signs up with us, the first thing that usually happens is they have a 30-minute phone call. And sometimes it's before the sale. It's usually before the sale. Sometimes it's after the sale, but most of the time farmers have to talk with us for at least 15 minutes before they buy. It makes me think a lot about the startup Superhuman. They require a 30-minute onboarding call with every customer, and it actually just makes the process go so much more smoothly moving forward. And I think farmers are one of those demographics where you just got to get on the phone with them.
Okay, great, thank you. And we'll stay with you. We're running out of time. So we'll go to the last question, and then we'll take some Q&A. Maybe in just a minute or two, as we look ahead, between the economic uncertainty and of course we're still in a COVID world. And then Jayce, in your particular industry, right, you've got potential issues with credit markets and the supply chain and trade issues and everything else. What do you really see going forward? Well, what's your just opinion here for the next, say, 12 to 18 months? How do you really see your business doing and the challenges you're going to face? Jayce? Oh.
Yeah, farmers are.
It's a big question, I know, but.
Yeah, farmers are hurting right now. They've had an extremely traumatic year. You look at livestock producers in the upper Midwest have had to slaughter thousands of animals in a period of 3 days. And that's not just, an economic hit, that's an emotional hit. Farmers have PTSD from this year. So you're dealing with an already, stressed out, overworked, underpaid population. And then on top of that, you have a political change that has also been something that farmers are uncertain about. They're not sure what this administration means for them in terms of farm policy, in terms of potential government support, and what it means in terms of commodity price fluctuations. There was a lot of hard things farmers had to deal with on that front too. And with the trade wars of the past administration and then coming into this year, the uncertainty that layered with COVID, farmers are like, okay, I need to just throw out worrying about long-term planning and just, think about surviving this year. And I think it's, as a startup, we've gone on a similar, I don't want to compare my journey to farmers' journeys, but I will say that when we were first doing need finding at the beginning of 2020, we were sharing a lot of uncertainty with farmers about the future of our business, because we were talking with VCs who were saying things like, bye-bye good times, like you should raise now, it might be harder later, like things are going to be tougher. And in terms of startup world, I think that the funding landscape has largely held steady. There's a lot of great opportunity to fundraise right now, so that's great for us. Unfortunately, though, it hasn't worked out so well for farmers. And so what I think the biggest question mark for me, and I want to make sure I answer your question, but also tell me if this is not, if this is, meandering a bit. When we think about setting farmers up for success, yes, they need resources to survive in the immediate term, but long term, we need to think about how are we helping farmers manage those cash flows, so that they have a cushion to be able to navigate the uncertainties of the next 4 years. We don't know what the heck 2021 is going to bring our way, let alone beyond that. And so thinking about the sustainability of businesses and how do we create buffers to make sure that we're safe no matter what the shocks are, that's really the core thing we're thinking about with farmers. And I think those lessons also translate to starting, a venture as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Sophia.
COVID has been a huge tailwind for our company, obviously. People want stuff delivered. People don't want to go to the pharmacy and risk getting coughed on. And everybody's scrambled. How do we do things remotely? We've been remote all along. And so a recent survey of people who've used birth control delivery said, will you go back to, the old ways? And 80% said, hell no. So we just need to convince the 80% of women that currently go to the pharmacy, go to a clinic to get their medications, that this is the future. And telemedicine is absolutely the future. But I do want to put a caveat out there for all of you consumers on the telemed side. If you're using your current doctor, go right ahead. But if you're choosing between two companies, maybe choose the female-founded, female-led, doctor-led one if it's about female health. And as a doctor, I'm one of the few CEOs that's taken the Hippocratic Oath. Do no harm. We will always tell you what's best for your health, even if it doesn't benefit our bottom line. And I can't say the same, no offense to all the MBAs in the room, for other CEOs that I see out there. And so when you're looking at telemedicine, do they list their doctors? I think if they don't list their doctors, a little questionable. Why are their doctors afraid to be associated with them? Or I saw one company, they listed the first name of their pharmacist, chief pharmacist, didn't list the last name. And maybe they're trying to be friendly, but like, really, can't I Google her and see her resume and where did you go to school? We proudly list all of our physicians, all of their academic credentials, and why they're passionate to make women's lives better. And we're here to make women's lives better. So we see just huge opportunity. We're building the brand that women trust. We're starting with birth control. Menopause is hot. We're gonna do acne. And I'm here for the long term. And I wouldn't be here if other people were doing it ethically and properly and scientifically. And so we're here to provide care, convenience, and confidentiality.
Awesome, thank you. So Ade, the existing environment, I assume would be good for moving analytics as well, no?
Yeah, it's definitely been, and just like Sophia, telemedicine is kind of, it's interesting because for the last 5 years, we've been trying to knock on people's doors and say, hey, you should really be thinking about this. And they're like, yeah, it's great. And, COVID happened and this is kind of the only option, that most people have to do rehab right now. So I think, for a lot of businesses, I think that, COVID has been an enabler. And obviously, as you think about like building your own companies now, I think it's very important to think through what's essential, what's going to work in a COVID-related world, in a post-COVID world where, how much of are we going to go back to how we used to do things before? I don't know, but I think thinking through business models that kind of like thrive in this kind of like a universe, and hopefully that would do well for you. So I think it's also just because of the volatility and everything in the market, it's also a good time as an entrepreneur. I feel like we've just tried to be frugal, through this whole process. There's a lot of unpredictability in the market too, so you kind of have to control what you can as well. So I think it's an exciting time to build a company, and there's some companies that are designed to be COVID friendly will do very well.
Great, thank you so much. And Antti, you were just thinking in general that just evolution would help Robocorp and just the RPA industry in general continue to grow. But how do you see all these factors really affecting you?
Yeah, well, when COVID started, the markets went into a free fall, and I used to say to the team before that, that we can only have two kind of events that are kind of end the company. Basically, one would be a major security breach of our platform. That would be one that would end it, and second would be a global financial crisis. Well, we went into a global financial crisis and came out of it pretty okay. We did raise another round of funding when that started happening. Just seemed like the prudent thing to do. But otherwise, like the COVID world, it's pretty exciting times in my opinion. Just the future has come 10 years early everywhere. Essentially, we have a tailwind in our industry. All the investors out there are basically looking for enterprise SaaS companies, so it's not a bad place to be as an entrepreneur. And so see, it looks, the outlook for fundraising is good. We're gonna fundraise this year, Series A, and growing a team globally never been easier. So we're hiring essentially best people around the world, 8 different countries right now. In the US, I think we have 5 different cities. No one's in the same city, I think. So it's an interesting world, but some things like time zones you cannot skip. those still exist, and they are a factor. But I'm excited how for instance, how many sales meetings I can do in one day, without having to fly to a different city and take a taxi and go to a meeting where awkward shirt on and do things like that. I can just be in my home office, going Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting and hopping on customer call to customer call. It's super exciting. And yeah, I mean, definitely just even with this kind of crazy times, we have a lot of exciting opportunities as entrepreneurs, and I think everything that comes by should be taking as one.
Thank you. We're running out of time, and there's been some questions that panelists, thank you, or others have been able to answer. But there's one, Antti, that probably, and if anyone else has an answer, jump in. But it's, how viable and technologically feasible must the product be before you have your first pitch in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think right now, if you can be convincing that you can build it, there's the seed or the pre-seed is moving earlier and earlier and earlier. So I think you should never think that it's too early to raise right now, since there's so much venture capital out there. But obviously you have to understand what you're building. So having some sort of a conviction in your own plan. I did years worth of exploration before starting the company. Others on this call have said that pretty much the same thing. Kind of the company has been something that they've basically built their lives for, essentially. So that helps, of course, getting the first investment. But yeah, you don't necessarily need to have 10 paying customers to go into the first pitch, because you might require $10 million to build your product out fully.
No, that's great. So we're completely out of time. Parting thoughts? Antti, again, since your mic's still open, anything you wanted to say or leave us with?
No, it was
Any
great
advice?
being here. It was great being here. Like I said, I had this coincidence with a similar event roughly 2 years ago, which led into the first fundraise of the company. So something that I think we are still missing in COVID times, if you come back to that, is how we connect with new people. How do we actually kind of serendipitously meet new faces, and that's, if somebody figures that out, I'm here to listen out on a pitch. Maybe that's something that we are missing out in this world.
Thank you so much. Ade, anything to add?
I think just go for it. Like there's a lot of thinking you can do, and like just go out. I would recommend to always optimize for customers first, right? And if you can kind of figure out that customer and figure out the need and pain, and then the fundraising should be much easier than that. But at the end of the day, you just gotta do it. You can't like hypothesize, and you can't like keep like thinking about it in your head. The more you go out and put it out there, the more you're going to make more traction, and the more you're going to get people who are going to support you. So just go do it.
Cool. Jayce?
I think, taking the leap to start a company, it's one of the biggest adventures of your life. And thinking about your track here in the context of your larger life's trajectory, and ensuring that the role you're playing is one that's positive, empowering, not just yourself, but also lifting others up. Almost seeing it like as part of the hero's journey, I think can be a really inspiring way to help put things in perspective, especially when you start getting the nitty gritty and feeling worn down by different things that pop up and are just really hard on a day-to-day basis. Always thinking about how you can build others. I think there's a lot of competition when it comes to fundraising, a feeling of it, but at the end of the day, the pie is more than big enough for everyone. And the more that you can support someone and mentor someone and make people bigger rather than pushing them down as you move forward, the more I think full and successful your life can be. I'm really here because Hira took a cold LinkedIn email outreach from me when I was looking for insight into his career and job. And this is, just one example of how you can help people along the way. So always be thinking about how you can build others as well as your company.
Thank you so much. And finally, Dr. Sophia.
Yeah, I would echo that, what you're going to be doing, there will be ups and downs. It will be a roller coaster, the highest highs you've ever had and the lowest lows within one email. You're like, yes. And you're like, no, and then you're like, yes. And you're like, no. And then you're like, yes. And hopefully you'll end on a yes. But if it's not something that you're passionate about, it's not something that you enjoy, definitely don't go there. And build your community, help everyone around you, and then it'll come back. I believe in karma. You put it out there and it will come back.